afternoon, everyone. If you're like me, you've been up since 4, so this is very much so the afternoon. I'd like for each of our panelists here to introduce themselves. So we'll start here with Idis. Idis, why don't you stand up and let everyone know first name, last name, and what you do here at iLife.
Hi, I'm Idis Figueroa, and I'm a quality assurance specialist here at Figueroa.
Thank you.
I am Tina Ramirez. I am the operations lead here at Baker.
Hi, I'm Natalie Reyes. I work at Whole Health Clinical Group as a case manager.
Hi, my name is Joseph Ydunate. I am in the Human Resource Department. I'm under Technology and Process Improvement.
Thank you very much. Give them a big round of applause. Thank you guys for starting it. Thank you. So what we'll do this afternoon is we'll go through a number of different questions, and each question that I ask that my panelists answer them individually. If you have any challenges or if any of our guests have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll go ahead and make sure that they get answered. Thank you. All right, Idis, we'll start with you. What's your ethnic background and national heritage? For instance, are you from the United States? What about your parents? And when or how did your family get here, if that applies?
Well, I'm of Puerto Rican heritage, so technically that makes me an American citizen. My parents were born in Puerto Rico as well, and we came to, I guess, the continental U.S. when I was 2 months old as a baby.
Very good, thank you.
While my ethnic background is mixed, my father is from Mexico. My mother's actually from Japan. My father came here as one of the very lucky ones who was granted a work visa and ended up getting legal residency when he was about 16 years old. So he migrated to Milwaukee. Me and my siblings are first-generation Americans.
Thank you.
Hi. Both my parents are Mexican, and they are from a southern state called Oaxaca. They both came here on a student visa, and I came along with them too. And I am also a first-generation American.
My parents, well, my father's from the Texas area. My mother's lived in Wisconsin her entire life. We have been in the United States, or my father's lineage has been in the United States since the late 1700s. Fifth, sixth generation, and born in the United States. So.
Thank you. What do you think of your ethnic national heritage, especially when you're thinking of pride? What gives you the most pride?
I think that identifying as Hispanic isn't just a preference or anything like that. I think it's a matter of survival, simply because a lot of Hispanics nowadays are kind of being forced to identify with kind of a binary race. Either you're Black Hispanic or white Hispanic, and it's one of those where you have to feel pride in your nationality so that we can celebrate, our differences. So when I consider myself Puerto Rican, I consider myself an American as well, but I do celebrate, just that we do have traditions, we do have cultural values and things like that.
I actually take a great sense of pride in taking any opportunity to explain that being Mexican is more than Taco Tuesday and sombreros, and I've done so many things to teach my kids and make sure that they're proud and that they are able to represent their culture and be pretty knowledgeable on it.
Same for me. I guess what I would say is the thing I'm most proud of the Mexican culture is how it's collectivist in general, but I'm able to assimilate to the American culture, which is very individualistic, and just kind of combine both and have a different perspective and teach others about how we can collaborate together and how we're not that different.
I think for myself, it's always been the values of my heritage, and the hardworking, the driven, the things about family and centering around family, and I can see it from my parents, my grandparents, to my own current family, how family is very important, and that's just passed down, and it's interesting because we see other families are like, oh, this is what we do here. We have this little routine. Well, that's a little different, but it's no different than having your own celebration within your own culture.
How do you think most Americans perceive people from your group, and what do you think are the biggest myths or misconceptions?
I'll start with the second part of the question. I think one of the funniest myths or misconceptions for me is that they think everything we cook is spicy. It's not, you know, for us. But I can definitely, I would hope that they can see us as, you know, like he said, hardworking people that, you know, most of us do come here to look for a better life. We look here for better opportunities, and we just want the same life that others, you know, are wanting.
I think with the current political climate, I want to make sure that people understand that the people that come from my background or people that, you know, in my Mexican culture, we are not, you know, all lazy. We're not all, as some of the rhetoric that's been said, you know, criminals and bad hombres. You know, we are very diverse from one region to the next. We have, like Iris was saying, we have Afro-Latinos, you know, Mexicans that are very dark. We have Mexicans that look very European. We're just a very diverse group of people. We're, like I said, we're a lot more than just what we've been kind of pigeonholed into.
I know you mentioned stereotypes, and I know a lot of the stereotypes are kind of, you're all Mexican, maybe, you would say that. And I just want to say that it's okay to ask people what your nationality is or where you're from, and it's not offensive. It's actually a great opportunity to know more about someone in general, but, you know, expose yourself to different cultures. It's okay to ask.
I think like with stereotypes, it's like my last name's Ydunate. It's Ydunate. And people will often mistake, look, it's not Gomez or Martinez or it's not that Santiago, it's not Sanchez. How can you be, you know, Hispanic? How can you be Mexican? You know, and it is. And as we've referred before, it is being Hispanic. You have many different cultures and backgrounds embracing and into it. And my last name is often kind of like, well, are you sure? You know, yeah, I am Hispanic, I'm Mexican. And the assumption that the stereotype that I often come across also is that we should automatically know Spanish just right out of the womb. It's like, boom, you should know it. I'm serious. When I was in college, and my parents didn't speak a lot of Spanish at home because when I was in elementary school, I was brought in and I brought in by the principal and the teacher, and they were telling me, hey, you know, your son's having a hard time with English, you know, so you need to stop speaking Spanish at home. And we had an interpreter there, you know. My mother's like, why do we have this guy speaking in Spanish, you know? So the assumption like that is that I'd be bad in grammar because maybe I'm bad at grammar, you know. Not because I'm Hispanic, but because the thought is I should know Spanish right away, you know. So yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I just want to kind of put out there as a myth buster. Not every Mexican or every person of Latin descent knows Spanish right out of the womb. So.
Thank you. Have you experienced language challenges or hurdles? If so, like what? And what about other organizations and businesses?
Well, I think definitely coming into corporate America and starting a job and having to say, well, it's Iris and not my, you know, given name of Edie's, because a lot of people couldn't pronounce that and it became frustrating. So I kind of had to, I don't want to say code switch, but just to try to assimilate more, you know, had to kind of change that. So that was kind of like my first experience of, you know, having to not necessarily change who I am, but try to be more comfortable or try to be more accepted, I guess. In the workplace. Language hurdles, I was kind of my mom's medical interpreter since I was like 7. So trying to explain her issues to the doctor very personal issues at that, and try to find the most professional medical term I could possibly, do while I'm in elementary or middle school was very, very fun. I kind of had to learn what were they trying to say, so I could try to explain that, because even though it might mean one thing in English, it may not be received that same way in our language or in our culture. And a lot of English refrains. I remember the first time I heard, well, that was the last straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, what does that mean? Because for us, we have a saying that it's like that was the last drop that broke the rock, like the last drop of water. So it was similar, but it wasn't the same thing. So trying to understand things like that kind of isn't a language barrier, but it's a cultural difference. But either way, we were trying to get to the same result. But yeah.
My language barriers was a little kind of on the reverse, kind of going off of what you said. Growing up, me and my siblings were not taught Spanish. We didn't speak Spanish in the household. When my father first migrated to this country, he didn't speak any English at all. So he was kind of learning, and I think it kind of also went along with the notion that my parents wanted us to be American. They wanted us to be, very kind of intertwined with the American culture so that we would have better opportunities. Like me and my brothers, we have very straightforward names, Robert, Daniel, Tina. There's no Latino, names in there. It's when we were saying our last names in middle school, it wasn't Ramirez, it was Ramirez. It was, that's more, I guess, where my language barriers were, because I went to a school with probably about 99% Latino kids from various different backgrounds. I was probably one of 30 kids that didn't speak Spanish growing up, so that was a little bit difficult. I used to get made fun of for that, but then I did take Spanish classes, so we're good now. I can talk to my family in Mexico without any issues, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, language is a big one. I didn't speak any English until I started kindergarten, which was really interesting for me because I wasn't integrated into a bilingual classroom, and there was no bilingual options actually at that school. And it was really interesting because my parents really stuck to only speaking Spanish at home. And I think it is because of them that I'm able to speak Spanish fluently, and I think I speak English a little well now, to be able to not speak Spanglish, which is kind of tricky for me sometimes because I want to use both in the same sentence. Like I want to say something in English and then I'm thinking Spanish. So it's really tricky for me. But I think that language is really interesting for everyone in general. I think just learning a second language is good for you. So I think everyone should learn a different language to try and experiment.
I totally identify with the Spanglish. As I said earlier, my parents didn't speak Spanish in our household, but when they wanted private conversations or they were yelling at us, it was definitely being taught at that point. So I didn't really, I kind of go back to that perception thing. So I took high school Spanish, and then my first year of college, I took, the first thing is whatever 101 Spanish, and I'm in the classroom, and the professor comes up and says, "What's that? This will not be an easy grade for you." And I'm like, I don't think it should be because I really don't know that much about Spanish. And he goes, "Como no?" And it's like, how don't you, But that was, so that's the kind of thing that you do kind of deal with, is that assumption, or if I know a little bit. I mean, I know much more now. I mean, I could definitely get my way around, but when I was a kid, I only knew the bad words. And I know those words now, so.
Thank you. So from a cultural standpoint, how do you think you're different than your parents, and how are you the same?
Ooh, well, my mom had me really late in life. She was almost approaching 41 when she had me. Surprise! But I think I'm very different compared to them because I'm a lot more open to just talking about things that are really taboo, like mental health or being open about sexuality or being more accepting of things that are really, really kind of looked down upon, especially in older Hispanic generations. How am I alike? I kind of find myself a lot of times, especially when I'm talking to my daughter, I'm like, oh my God, I just sounded like my mom, you know, and in that child rearing thing, I think we're very similar. They taught me a lot of good traditional family values, so I'm thankful to them for that.
I think the ways that I am most similar to my parents is just in the way that I raised my family, taking a lot of those togetherness times and making sure that, you know, holidays and, you know, that we're just a very tight-knit family. We still sit down and eat dinner together every night. And I guess we're very different in the sense that, like my father came here with a middle school education. He didn't really have that much opportunity, so they gave everything they had to me and my siblings to make sure that we had those opportunities and made sure that we took them. They made sure that we took I was in cultural dancing up until high school. We played sports. We did like everything that my parents kind of wanted, you know, I guess they were maybe vicariously living through us a little bit, but with the good intentions, not like, you know, stage moms or anything.
Yeah, I think for me and my family, a lot of our values are exactly the same. You know, we value being together and just family as being the most important thing. And for differences, my parents are very open-minded and they're very supportive. So I would say most of my extended family might have more close-minded views as far as mental health and you know, education and even just like feminism and machismo and that culture. Like I've experienced a lot of machismo from my extended family, but my immediate family not so much. So it's really interesting to see how it plays out.
Natalie, can you tell us what machismo is for individuals who might not be familiar with the term?
So machismo in the Hispanic culture is basically the man is the main provider and he tells the woman, which is his wife, what to do, like kind of expects things from her. It's not really a partnership. It's very sexist and there's not a lot of room for respect maybe because everyth's just expected. Like you wash the dishes, like you do the laundry, you take care of the kids. It's expected. But
Thank you.
That's kind of hard to follow up with. Well, and you know, with my both my parents worked hard, and their education level wasn't very high in either aspect. You know, my dad was basically on his own at 13. He traveled from Texas to Wisconsin for a job, and he met my mom a couple years later, and she dropped out of high school and they got married. So, you know, the one thing that kept them, that they always demonstrated to our families, if you want something, you have to work hard, you have to be committed, you have to have drive, and that work ethic has to be there. My father never missed work in 32 years. Even when my mom was having us kids, he wasn't there, you know. We came out and he came after work. So there are some things, and it's very, and the machismo part is true. But my dad was kind of halfway about that because he also taught us how to cook and sew, which is a little different because, again, maybe they became more Americanized, but there were certain things he expected my mom to do, you know. And for myself, you know, how am I different? That is definitely one of the different things that I have. That I learned. I took away from my parents the drive and the education being important. It's very different from what, you know, they had the opportunities of getting that higher education that I had. And you know, as I look at that, I take away the work ethic from them. And then, you know, there's a lot of things that sometimes I wonder, well, do I sound like him? You know, and I'm not sure. You know, because it's like, I know my dad would say this, but would he say it differently? You know, probably a little more rougher. You know, but I definitely see those things come out when with being a parent and at work at sometimes.
So some people talk about experiencing a minority moment. the moment that they realized that they were different from the folks that maybe they worked with or went to school with, the individuals that were around them. When did you realize that you were different? And did you have a minority moment?
I think touching back on just the whole kind of being expected to be my parents, translator from so young, and even when they would call my mom's name, in the hospital, and her name is Dominga Machado, but then Miss McAdoo, and I was like, do you mean Machado? Dominica. Okay, that's not it, but okay, well, we're coming. And that was kind of like, wow, okay, like no one else is here with their parents, everyone is kind of, able to speak for themselves or fend for themselves, and even yet today, being an only child, I still have to take care of, today's third of the month, her social security, then, well, I gotta go pay her rent, I gotta pay her energies, I gotta do all of that, because she was also limited education, she can't really read and write, so now I'm the parent. And so it's kind of been my way of, identifying myself as different, because I have to do all that for her. So.
My minority moment actually came right out of 8th grade. I, again, went to a school that was like 99% people that looked exactly like me. We were all brown. We all had, parents that were likely, immigrants. They had a lot of first-generation Americans. So I never realized that there was so much different out there, or that people could look at me and see something different. I was working at State Fair one year behind a concessions counter, and clearly wasn't moving fast enough for somebody, and I got my first racial slur. Broke me down, tore me up inside completely. I just didn't understand it. I never before that moment did I ever think I am different. I am different than some of these other people out here. It just was never really a thing in our community, in our school. It was the norm. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock.
My minority moments would be, it was pretty young. I was in elementary school, I remember. I was pretty self-aware even as a second grader, I think. And they were talking about American Girl dolls, all these other girls, and they're like, oh, they don't have one that looks like you. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, well, you're olive skin tone. I was like, what is that? So I don't know what olive is, me not being able to understand English either. And then I was like, okay, olive, I thought that was a food or something. I'm so confused. So it wasn't until I asked my teacher, and then she explained to me that there are different colors, but it didn't hit me until then. I was like, okay, well, I didn't know I was different. But I think my teacher explained it very well. So it wasn't necessarily a traumatizing experience, just being very self-aware.
I played baseball since I can remember, and I was always a catcher. And I had a guy come up to hit, and I was probably like 7 or 8, and my name is Joe, and he knew that. And he goes, Joe, suck your toe all the way back to Mexico. and I looked at that, and I didn't. It hit me just like that, and because I grew up in the suburb, and I was my family was the only Hispanic family in the subdivision, and it took me okay, and then I became very protective of my siblings after that, because I just felt like, okay, that we are different, and I had to remember that all the time when we're out in the phone. So that was my moment.
Do you have children? And if so, how do you see them relating to your ethnic heritage differently than you do?
I do have one daughter. She's 11 going on 32. And she looks like you. And I think she's at that age now where she is trying to find herself. And she is fluent in Spanish. And she's finding now that I put her back in bilingual classes. And I had taken her out actually in K-5 because she was the only Afro-Latina child in this bilingual class with other Hispanic kids that looked more like us. And, you know, I would have her hair braided, I would have her hair with beads and stuff, and the kids were like, why you look like this and you speak Spanish? Why your hair like this? You're not right, you know? And one of the girls actually ended up cutting one of her hair with the beads off. So my daughter in turn took her hair and cut a chunk off too and said, now we're even. But she got suspended in K5 for that. And I kind of was like, well, did the other girl get suspended? Well, no, because it's always the second action that counts. And I'm like, well, and at this time, that teacher also was a teacher that had been there when I went to that elementary school. She was from El Salvador, and she was a very closed-minded, and they were antagonizing my child, and it was they were breaking her to that point where she felt she had to take that action for them to respect her. And when I moved her out into the monolingual classes, she was great. She excelled. She's currently testing above 83rd percentile of kids in her, you know, same grade, and she's back in bilingual. But now she sees other peers that look like her. And I grew up in River West. I grew up on the east side where the neighborhood looks like this. And, you know, I've always felt included, and I want her to experience that as well, where we can take pride in our differences, but value that we're not all that different, and we can all celebrate, you know, our differences. So she's definitely finding herself, and I'm trying to help her, you know, find her identity in that.
Do you have children? And if you do, how do you see them relating to your ethnic heritage differently than you do?
I do. I have 4 children. They are very in touch with both of their sides. They are half black and then they are half me. So yeah,
that's Mexican and Japanese.
Yes. So I try to make sure that they understand. You know, that my kids do look more so like black than they do Latino. But they speak Spanish. I taught them how to cook some of our ethnic cuisine. They love Selena. They, we try to take any moment and make sure that they know that there is a way to be included. And even though they are these 2 different cultures, I mean, there's really a lot of similarities just being a minority in America. So a lot of those things kind of come together. And, you know, like you were saying, your daughter, when she was younger, there was not so many that looked like her. And now it's, you know, it's kind of a more diverse world, and it's more acceptable to be, you know, from this shade over to this shade. So, yeah, I think my kids are pretty well versed in their ethnicities.
I don't have any children. However, I do have one younger brother. I guess that's another stereotype I forgot to mention. Not all Hispanic families have a lot of siblings. I only have one brother. I do have a lot of first cousins that, the ones that are younger than me, I do kind of take on that parent role at times, just because I'm the first one to have gone to college and, you know, even have some experience in the workforce that's a little bit more professional, and they look up to me even, you know, filling out their FAFSA paperwork, and I would go to their soccer games or pick them up from basketball, and it's just all these parental things I was in charge of, and my parents weren't around because they were working all the time. So in a way, I feel like I've had kids, but I don't have any biological children.
I have one son, and he is immersed with traditions from both sides of his family, and we make tamales at the holidays at my family, and he's like, it's really messy, you know, and it is kind of, it's a lot of work, by the way. So he's like, that's a messy thing. But on the flip side, my wife's side, you know, they do these small Danish skewer things. It's like a mini pancake. It's super easy to make. He thinks he's a professional chef when he does those. So you know, it's food, it's conversation, it's what my mother still tells him, the stories of what she did when she was a child, and knowing when my dad was alive, my dad would tell him about how he would like to run. He was a runner at one point. I don't know where he was running, but so my son said that's what I wanted. That's my sport, running, even though really he's not a really good runner. But anyway, but you know, look, I think culturally, you know, there's things he takes on, and there's things he's like, I'm not interested in, you know, and so I think that again it's something choices he makes, you know, because there's good and he's like, I don't want to know that. I was having to watch Univision with me, and he's like, oh, this is really different, you know. So, but anyway, but yeah, there's good. He takes some things away, and other things he doesn't choose not to.
So what's Univision, Joe?
Oh, Univision is a Latin television station, and if you watch Univision, they have different programs, sporting events.
Sábado Gigante.
Yes. and that's a great way to expose, just to see that, you know, people think all Latinos are dark-skinned, and there's some that truly are, and there's some that are very light-skinned, and when you watch Univision, you're like, wow, that's, you know, we could be in Mexico City right now, and this is how if we were in a room in Mexico City, this is how the room could look, to be honest with you. I've been in Mexico, and I was very like, wow, you know, it's very diverse.
What do you think are the biggest challenges facing Hispanics or Latinos in the United States right now?
I think definitely in today's political climate, I think a lot of people are struggling to identify as Hispanic in fear of some type of retaliation or some type of negative action, you know, towards us, simply because it's kind of being facilitated by our president, unfortunately. That's just my opinion. But I think it's difficult for us to say we're prideful in our heritage without sounding like we're putting down, you know, being anything else, you know, and I think nationalism kind of gets a bad rap for that because, well, why do you hang a Puerto Rican flag in your vehicle if you're an American? Or, well, I can celebrate both. You know, being pro this doesn't mean anti that. That by becoming more vocal, you know, about it and kind of sticking together, that we can all just, you know, overcome whatever negativity is in the air right now.
I think the biggest hurdle facing Latinos these days is just being brown in America. I mean, even to speak your own language while you're, you know, out in the store, you get people that, you know, tell you things like speak English, go back to Mexico, and that's another thing. They lump everybody these days. Yep. You're all Mexican. If you're brown, you're Mexican. If you speak Spanish, you're Mexican. And again, that comes from the, you know, the political climate and a lot of the things that are said that kind of incites a fear or a hatred within people that don't really know, that aren't really familiar with the community itself. So, yeah.
I think you guys have summarized so well. I guess another one would be the lack of representation. Just for any person of color, just not a lot of representation, but even for Hispanic cultures, you know, you don't really have that in the workplace sometimes, or, you know, just whenever you attend certain activities, even in the Wisconsin area. So that's one I would say.
Yeah, the political climate is definitely makes things difficult. You know, there's a lot of assumptions. You know, there's a lot of people thinking you have to be this, like that. You know, when I think about, you know, Latinos in the United States, there's like almost 60 million Latinos in the United States. That's a lot, right? 36 million are Mexican, and the rest are from the different spices of life. But as you said earlier, we all get lumped together, and some of the perception we get is we just got here, or we're doing something wrong if we do speak our own language or Spanish. If I do Spanglish with my mother, you know, it's weird. When I took her to the doctor's office, I was speaking a little Spanish with her. Some things are private, and if it's an open area, that she feels much more comfortable with speaking Spanish, you know. But I would say those are definitely the challenges that we have.
there is evidence that more Hispanics and Latinos are beginning to identify as white. Do you? And if so, what do you think about the concept?
Colorism is very, very real in the Hispanic culture. And it's unfortunate because when you visit Mexico or even Puerto Rico, you see, I have cousins that look like Lanisha, I have cousins that look like Christy. And it's kind of like, well, you know, don't, and my own father told me, don't mess up the race when I was pregnant. And it was kind of shocking to me because his biological father was black, and he was given up for adoption, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't raised like that, but like I said, I came up in River West where, you know, luckily I didn't experience any of that there, but I don't identify as white, whether it's on the census or W-4 or whatever the case may be. But simply it's because that's just not how I was raised. I can identify, you know, more with my people. And I say my people not just because it's what's in my blood, but it's who I advocate for. It's who, you know, I surround myself with. And I think it's more of how society has conditioned us that white is right. And they don't want to be associated or even maybe negated a loan or a job opportunity because they may put other or Hispanic or something on an application. Even then how, you know, your family, Tina, Daniel, Robert, it's not Maria or Esmeralda or, you know, whoever. It's, you know, and it's totally understandable. You want to be accepted and try to assimilate into this country that you came here for, looking for better opportunity. But yeah, colorism is very real and it's unfortunate, but hopefully once we learn that we are celebrated, that we can just all come together.
So before we go on, Tina, for any of the guests that are visitors here to this building, can we have Christy and Lanisha stand up? So this is the reference that Edis was making.
Yeah.
Very real. Yeah. Thank you very much, ladies.
Yeah, I'm a big one for marking the other box.
The other box.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, you know, you were always taught, well, you mark the Caucasian box, the white race. That's technically what we're considered, you know, based on that type of information. But I just kind of after high school and kind of educating myself and trying to become more in tune with my cultural backgrounds. I just decided that I was going to be other. If that hindered me in any way, then that's just so be it. I'm very proud to be other. And yeah, I see a lot of the colorism thing that Iris was talking about. You know, to some people I'm really dark, to some people I'm really light, so I can kind of be you know, you can kind of be on like I said, one spectrum all the way to the other side of it. It's yeah, we are technically considered Caucasian, but yeah, I like the other box.
Yeah, I definitely don't consider myself white, but growing up, it kind of has been, even in the Mexican culture, kind of thinking that white is right. Whenever you watch, you know, TV on Univision, the Latin show he mentioned, or not commercial, just station, you see that all of the actors and actresses, they're actually very light-skinned, or they have more European features, and that's kind of favorited even in the Mexican culture. So that's always been interesting to me, and I try to set myself apart from that, even with just speaking Spanish, and I kind of see it as an act of defiance when I know that other people don't understand me. I'm not trying to be aggressive. I'm proud to be able to speak a different language, and I like to differentiate myself sometimes.
Yeah, you know, I'm very dark-skinned, and my siblings are very light-skinned. And, you know, sometimes people will be like, "You're related?" Yeah, this is my brother. You know, so, you know, dealing with that, you know, and the old stereotypes of, you know, do we check, what do we check, you know? I've always checked the other. I mean, because again, you know, I'm not white, and that's just the way it is. My dad is very light-skinned. He's Spaniard. His Spaniard descent, you know, and he's very light-skinned. He's probably you, Nick. Yeah, and but people would think my dad was white, and he would do, no, I'm Mexicano. And he would respond just like that, no, I'm Mexicano. And but no, you know, there are definitely struggles with people who, what do you do? I want to fit in, you know. I'm proud of who I am, you know, and so I could see why some people would check Caucasian or white, but that's their choice. You know? That's how I look at it.
What was that?
I was like, oh, my other brother. We like the other box.
Do you identify with Hispanics or Latinos from countries other than your own national or ethnic heritage? Why or why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can cook, you know, slightly different things in slightly different ways just because of what was available to us at the time, you know, or what's native to the island or where we're from. But we're raised very, very similarly, and you know, it is shown that family is important, and coming together not just for, you know, holidays and funerals and oh, the 3-year-old birthday party, oh, bring the talk back up, you know, and always having an excuse to come together and have fun, not just for important things or sad things, but just to celebrate the small milestones in life. And I think that's something that I, you know, share with Colombian friends, my Mexican friends. I have friends from Honduras, and yeah, we all like to celebrate life and each other.
Yeah, I think, especially in this day and age with, you know, the things that are going on, I feel like we kind of gravitate closer to each other. We have more of an understanding with each other. You know, you see someone, you're like, hey, you're like me, or oh, your last name, okay, we're similar. You know, plus there's just different things. We all have the same language, you know, or the dialect is a little bit different. There's some words here and there, but for the most part, Spanish is the same. You know, we all kind of grew up with those kind of like strict mothers, and you know, we all kind of have similar cuisine, like you were saying. We all know what the chancla is.
Yes.
You know? So a sandal, it's a weapon.
That's
for
a
a Latino mother. Yes. So yeah, I really don't see much difference between Mexican, Puerto Rican, Costa Rican, Colombian.
And it's fun to learn about each other.
Yeah, I feel like we have so many similarities that, yeah, we are basically, since we are lumped together, we might as well all be together. One big happy family.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I feel like they couldn't have said it any better. If anything, I love when I see another person that looks like me, or I don't know. But it's just nice being a big happy family. Might as well be.
I love the food. So truly, it's always, you know, as you're talking about the food, I think that's like one of the common things.
Yeah.
It's like we do it this way. We do put a little chicken in here, a little right. But anyway, yeah, I sorry, I get off topic, but yeah, yes, it is.
It's almost lunchtime.
Yes.
It's 9 lunchtime.
Sorry.
So do you think that Hispanics or Latinos are stereotyped in the media? And if so, how? You had mentioned that just earlier, Edith. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think, and she mentioned it as well, how we can turn on Telemundo or the Spanish station, and what we see are, you know, European actors and actresses, but the help look like Joe. And it's like, you know, we're definitely not, but you know, we're definitely not accurately represented like that in the media. And you know, it kind of, it hurts, you know, sometimes that you can't relate to what you see on screen, or it's always like the more affluent types that, you know, are more European looking, and the darker ones are either they're the homeless person or they're the servants or whatever the case may be. And like I said, it's the evidence of colorism, you know, in our culture.
Yeah, I think the stereotypes is extremely prevalent. I mean, in American media, you know, it's always the fiery Latina, the sexy Latina, the spicy one. You know, we're not all like Sofia Vergara, you know, which is a beautiful accent, beautiful woman, but that's not who we all are. You know, we all don't speak with the accent. We don't all, you know, it's, yeah, there is a little bit of a lack of representation, of real representation for Latinos in American media. But yeah, it's getting better. I think it's been getting progressively better over time. I think there's more dialogue about it now, so people are a little more aware about it now and kind of starting to take a little bit more action on that. So
I guess people aren't really aware until it's pointed out, but the same thing, it depends on what type of media. If it's a news outlet, sometimes Hispanic people are focused more on, like, well, all news stories are very negative to begin with, but if you're watching like something popular, like a movie or that sort of thing, you see more of the European-looking Hispanic people. So maybe just be aware of it. I don't know. It's something to look for next time.
And they are right. I am the criminal in a lot of movies. But it's true. I mean, I think with and that's why I exposed that to Univision, because I wanted to see the differences. You know, hey, look, see what I'm saying? And I think the media does have a lot of influence on projecting. You know, just alone, you know, think about, you know, on a crime story, it's someone like me committing the crime usually. You know. And then people think, oh my God, you know, all Hispanic males who are stocky and built, you know, must be bad, you know. Not necessarily.
What do you think are the biggest healthcare challenges for Hispanics and Latinos right now?
Oh man, we gotta tone down on the salt. The salt, sodium is a killer, and I think that realizing that a lot of our cultural cuisine is detrimental to our health. A lot of the, you know, seasonings and stuff that have MSG and can heighten our blood pressure. And I think one of the staples in Puerto Rican cuisine is pork. And pork, actually, it affected my father because he suffered of gout. And I guess one of the triggers of gout is uric acid. And every time he sat down and ate his rice, beans, and one pork chop, within hours, he couldn't close his fist. His joints would be swollen. His knees would be swollen. He had to have fluid drained out of his knees. And, you know, it's kind of like, hey, but I gotta have my pork. And I think it's trying to make those lifestyle changes, you know, away from tradition that's difficult for us, and also kind of being open to treatment, because I think, you know, a lot of people say, well, back in my day, we didn't hear a lot about cancer. We didn't hear a lot about autism. We didn't hear, because we weren't allowed to talk about it. You couldn't, you know, tell the neighbor, oh, I think my son has this. They would look at you like, okay, we're not going to that house. You know, we're not going to that. It was really, you know, taboo to talk about things like that. And, you know, it's definitely, you know, difficult even for people to accept, well, something is wrong with me. Let me, you know, go to the doctor and actually go tell somebody that's not my immediate family member what's wrong so they can help me. And definitely maybe in the more, you know, older generations, but I can definitely say even for my parents now, you know, my mom's, she turned 72 this year, and, you know, it's getting really difficult trying to do everyday things with her, but she's like, no, I'm in my right mind. Don't tell me I'm not. Well, we just talked about this 7 minutes ago. I think we need to go see somebody about this, you know, but yeah, I think it's just definitely trying to cope with being open and just accepting that you need help from a professional, no matter what, if it's a physical or mental ailment.
I think some challenges with Latinos and healthcare would be just seeking healthcare, being able to, you know, a lot of people that come here, whether or not they made it across the border legally, that's beside the point. There's a lot of people here who maybe have, you know, lower paying jobs, factory jobs, things that, you know, like entry level type work, where they might not be able to afford healthcare. There's a lot of instances where people might not even want to go to an emergency room or an urgent care for fear that, you know, they might think I'm illegal. They might call ICE. They might hold, you know, me in a detention center. You know, it even goes as far as, I was just reading an article where a nursing student was denied nursing school because she was a DACA recipient. because there's some, logistics there that prohibited her from being able to take part in this program. So there's a wide umbrella of different things that Latinos in America face with the healthcare.
I guess as far as healthcare, I know that we mentioned a lot of minorities do belong to lower socioeconomic groups, and I think as a result, they have to budget differently, and that comes to food too. As you go grocery shopping, you kind of tend to pick the cheaper options and the cheaper alternatives, and in a way, I feel that it's a form of systematic racism. These grocery stores with fresher produce or healthier options aren't available in these neighborhoods that belong to socioeconomic groups. So I think that's part of, a way that everything just trickles down, and it's kind of made to be a disadvantage to, minorities.
I don't think there's enough education on diabetes within our culture. We love our sweets. We love our pan. We a lot of carbs. And my father actually diabetes did a lot to his body, and my uncle as well. And so I'm kind of screwed, I guess. But just overall, Hispanics do have an increase of diabetes, and no one really talks about it. It's kind of going back. We don't want to know. We don't want to know because we don't want to break tradition. We don't want to change how we're eating, the access to the food, because again, it's what we like. It's comfort food, So I think diabetes is one of the things that really in the Latino culture we need to talk more about.
Thank you. Now, for the sake of time, does anyone have any questions? Go right ahead. Oh, fantastic. I get to pick. Oh, very good. Yeah. I want to read all three of them, but we'll start with one. What is an initiative you would like to see started by the respective teams that help the clients we serve?
I think one of my biggest initiatives is that, and I don't want it to sound the wrong way, but if I'm being hired for a certain position and my second language is being required to assist or to help, that you compensate us as such. And I think that not only because is it a money thing, but it's because it takes a lot more effort to try to explain to, again, individuals who are of limited education, that experience the language barrier, to explain them not just what's on the paper, but the process. Some of these people maybe have never worked in their life, and you're explaining to them how to fill out a timesheet or how to complete an application. You have to write your last name here and your first name here. Some people still sign with the X because they don't know how to write their name, and that's for any language. That we need to be recognized for that extra effort, regardless.
Well, great question, Yuri.
We can come back to you, Tina.
Yes, we'll go back.
Yeah.
I don't have anything specific that I could think of, but definitely the bilingual thing, and it requires extra effort. It should be compensated, but maybe even verifying that if you say you're bilingual, if it's for a specific position, just make sure that you can be able to provide those services. Don't just say you're bilingual and not be able to be fluent in whatever language you say you're in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the language it does take a lot. I worked for 15 years in an agency which we did home care, and a lot of our Hispanic employees did not know how to fill an application out, and it does take time. And because their education is, we just assume everybody knows, they don't know. And even when we made the materials in the Spanish, and they couldn't read it because again they're not proficient at their own language. So I think those are kind of initiatives, of taking time and resources and making sure that they're taken care of, because those are valuable resources that we have.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, I would like to personally thank you for participating in one of my favorite agency values, and that's understanding people. I always find an opportunity to bring one of our values in, and I hope that you do as well. And please thank our panelists as well. There's sweets in the back, so please don't overlook them.